The following is a graphic depiction of a prehistoric apocalypse. Viewer discretion is advised. It exploded with the force of 1,000,000 nuclear bombs and unleashed the power of the sun. It set ablaze the entire biomass of Earth and cooked the atmosphere. What was once a vibrant planet became a wasteland where billions of life forms were vaporized and turned to ash. What happened in the final days, hours, and minutes of the dinosaurs? What was the first apocalypse like on planet Earth? They're the Earth's first fighters, the ultimate predators. New discoveries in forensic science bring to life the prehistoric art of war. This is Jurassic Fight Club. Four and a half billion years ago, the first life forms appeared on Earth. They've engaged in a battle for survival ever since, combating new predators, environmental catastrophes, and mega disasters. While many were able to adapt, most species fail and are erased from existence. Planet Earth has faced 5 such extinctions.
When we look at the history of life, we see that there are many, many extinction events throughout the last 4.5 billion years, that is, throughout the history of the Earth. The one with the dinosaurs 65.5 million years ago was a big extinction, but that wasn't even the biggest. There have been many that have been far worse. Every once in a while, there's some really, really major events, what we call mass extinctions, where we lose lots of different species of many different ecological types. Plants, animals, predators, herbivores, sea animals, land animals.
Extinction is the normal outcome of evolution. The fact of the matter is over 99% of all the organisms that have ever lived are extinct. So it isn't unusual to become extinct, it's actually normal. But there are certain periods in which there's more extinction than usual. We call these mass extinctions.
Mass extinctions can occur over an extended period, or they can happen in the blink of an eye.
These mass extinction events can be seen in the fossil record. You'll find the fossil remains of thousands of life forms in one layer of dirt, and then none of those same plants and animals in the layer directly above. So what that tells us is something caused a lot of things to die between this time and that. Sometimes the distance between those layers of rocks can represent millions of years, and other times they can be months, weeks, or even days.
"250 million years ago, one group of beasts would rise above all others and claim the world as their own. It was the Mesozoic era, and the dinosaurs reigned supreme. And before they were ultimately wiped out, they would evolve to become the fastest, smartest, and most successful animals on Earth."
There are 2 reasons why dinosaurs took over the planet. The first was their larger than average brains. Now, compared to you and I, they're not that smart. But in their time, they were the most intelligent creatures on Earth. But the main reason why they were so successful was because of the design of their hips and legs. The reptiles and mammals of their time had legs that stuck out to the side of their body. This meant that running was a bit more difficult because the entire body waddles from side to side. but the dinosaurs carry their legs directly beneath their body like we do. And this meant that they could run much faster and a lot more efficiently than anything else. So being faster and having the ability to run longer is what gave them a competitive edge that no other creatures could match.
With their superior leg design and large brains, dinosaurs expanded their mastery to cover every continent on Earth and evolved an amazing array of body designs. Giant, long-necked sauropods were able to browse at treetop levels, while other plant-eating dinosaurs were perfectly adapted to take advantage of the low-growing vegetation.
When you look at Stegosaurus and Camarasaurus, you'd be hard-pressed to find two dinosaurs with such different feeding habits. Camarasaurus feeds high in the trees, whereas Stegosaurus was a low browser. Since both of these dinosaurs went extinct at the end of the Jurassic, then it's safe to suggest that all plants, from the tallest trees to the lowest shrubs, were affected by some sort of environmental change. And if the plants were changing, this would have a huge impact on the plant eaters who relied on them for life.
The late Jurassic period also saw apex predators all over the globe, from Denver, Colorado to Beijing, China. Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus were the deadliest.
Ceratosaurus was more of a niche predator. It certainly would have had to have been specialized on a certain type of behavior with feeding. It may have fed solely on sauropods, it may have fished, it may have gone after smaller prey.
Big animals like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus are the first to suffer during a dramatic climate change. Because of their sheer size, they require a certain amount of food and a certain amount of water.
But just as the dinosaurs were beginning their ascent, a massive explosion in deep space would start a countdown to Armageddon. Two giant asteroids collided. The larger of the two was named Baptistina.
We think it was probably on the order of about 170 kilometers across. And then something very large slammed into it, we think about 160 million years ago. The size of the impactor isn't quite known, but we think it might be on the order of about 60 kilometers or so. And that completely pulverized what we call the Baptistina parent body.
With one asteroid 105 miles in diameter and the other the size of Rhode Island, the impact between these two celestial missiles caused Baptistina to break up, shooting fragments out of orbit and into the solar system. Most of these fragments ended up floating harmlessly in space, but a few headed toward a collision with Earth. This massive asteroid strike would ultimately wipe out the dinosaurs for good. But strangely, this cataclysm from space was not the first massive disaster that the dinosaurs faced. 100 million years earlier, the dinosaurs suffered another less complete extinction. This first extinction came towards the end of the Jurassic period. It is estimated that 25% of all life forms were wiped off the planet. So what caused this first extinction?
When the environment changed at the end of the late Jurassic, it really caused problems for the bigger dinosaurs. Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus could simply be victims of their inability to adapt to this new environment.
Today, it's still a mystery. Some believe that they may have been the victims of their own success.
They seem to have been driven to extinction by their own success. That sounds strange, but once you think about it, a successful dinosaur is one that produces descendants. And in the next time period, the early Cretaceous, there are new allosaurs and new ceratosaurs in different parts of the world. More sophisticated descendants of each of these forms. Things that were too sophisticated for the original Ceratosaurus and the original Allosaurus to compete against. So as old-fashioned Ceratosaurus and old-fashioned Allosaurus themselves, they both disappeared.
But few realize that in every major extinction, no matter how catastrophic, there are always survivors. And for those plants and animals that are able to adapt quickly enough, the world is theirs for the taking.
It's easy to think that all dinosaurs lived and died at the same time, but that's not the case. For instance, dinosaurs like Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, and Camarasaurus lived in the Jurassic period and died out tens of millions of years before dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus Rex showed up. In fact, the time that separates those dinosaurs from T-Rex is longer than the amount of time that separates T-Rex from us.
The thing about extinction events is that, of course, they're very bad for the animals that go extinct, but they open up a door of opportunity for a lot of other animals and plants. And basically, once certain species disappear, then other species will evolve and change and take over their place in that particular ecosystem or habitat.
Ultimately, it would be the giant asteroid that would end the reign of the dinosaurs. But that deadly space missile took over 250 million years to finally reach Earth. In the meantime, the dinosaurs waged a savage battle for survival as the asteroid made a beeline for Earth. "144 million years ago, at the end of the Jurassic era, many dinosaur species fell victim to climate changes that likely brought about their first extinction. But a host of others managed to rise to power.
More efficient plant eaters like Gastonia and Thanatosaurus were able to fill the void left by their predecessors. And in turn, new predators appeared along with them.
At the top of the food chain, the raptors.
These predators were more advanced than their earlier cousins. This is when raptors like Deinonychus and Utahraptor made their debut.
Over the next 79 million years, dinosaurs continued to reign as the unchallenged rulers of Earth. No other animals could match their size, power, and ferocity. By the end of the Cretaceous period, global environmental changes saw the emergence of tougher, more fibrous species of plants. To take advantage of these new food sources, specially adapted herbivores evolved.
By the end of the Cretaceous, we had some very advanced dinosaurs. There were lots of species of ceratopsians, these were the horned dinosaurs, and there were an abundance of duck-billed dinosaurs called hadrosaurs. Both of these groups had remarkably advanced teeth and jaw design, which allowed them to eat a wider variety of plants. And the predators also had become more advanced. Dinosaurs like Albertosaurus was able to hunt cooperatively with other members of their own family, while raptors took pack hunting to a whole new level. But sitting atop all of these was Tyrannosaurus Rex. He was the ultimate predator in Earth's history, and yet with all these evolutionary advancements, they literally disappeared in the blink of an eye.
"65 million years ago, the giant asteroid that had been hurtling towards Earth finally struck. On land and in the sea, nothing was safe.
All the dinosaurs in the world at that time became extinct, along with a lot of the big reptiles that sort of looked like dinosaurs. Things like mosasaurs, plesiosaurs in the ocean, and on land, of course, the Tyrannosaurus Rex and Nanotyrannus and Triceratops, and all the duck-billed dinosaurs and all the little raptors and so forth. It was a pretty much extinction of everything.
For many years, scientists were baffled by this instant Armageddon. To experts, it was astounding that so much carnage could have hit in a sudden, catastrophic event.
The time in geological history that separates the end of the Cretaceous from the Tertiary period is marked with a very distinctive band of clay. You can see this thin band in locations throughout the world, and it clearly marks the spot where something major had taken place. Below it, we find dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and a variety of giant sea reptiles. But above that line, we don't see any evidence of these same creatures. So this layer clearly represents that something dramatic had happened on Earth that caused a mass extinction in a very short time.
The layer that separates the two periods is called the KT boundary. The KT boundary marks the end of the age of dinosaurs and the beginning of the age of mammals. But does the KT boundary signify the absolute end of all dinosaurs? Incredibly, many experts believe that dinosaurs are still among us.
At 65.5 million years ago, the age of dinosaurs came to an end. After that point, mammals were the dominant land-living creature. However, it's important to remember that although the age of dinosaurs came to an end, the dinosaurs themselves did not. Well, it turns out that one branch of that group survived, and that's the great group of birds. Birds themselves are the descendants of creatures very closely related to things like Deinonychus and Utahraptor. And so birds are, by definition, part of the dinosaur group. So the dinosaurs survived, but I have to say, all the really cool ones died out.
This extinction event was not only distinctive for how quickly it happened. The force of this blast is simply unimaginable to us today.
There are numerous kinds of extinction events. Some can be local, where only a few plants and animal species are affected. Some can be regional, where quite a few species get it. And then there are those events that are so enormous, they make modern Hollywood effects look like an Ed Wood movie effect.
Still, scientists were initially at a loss to explain how this could have happened. One theory pointed to global warming. Climate change had likely been a major factor in the first dinosaur extinction, so it seemed a likely candidate as the cause of the second one. The fact that the blast impacted land and sea creatures alike seemed to support this theory.
Extinction's actually worldwide. It's not just a terrestrial phenomenon. It doesn't occur just on land. In fact, most of the really spectacular extinctions have been based in the oceans. So we have whole groups of animals which are simply not around today. And extinction in the marine realm is really for the same reasons it occurs on land.
The loss of so many species at the end of the Cretaceous period would stymie scientists for years. But finally, a startling discovery would change everything. Like something out of a science fiction movie, it would shock scientists around the world. The cause of a mass Armageddon some 65 million years ago had baffled modern science for decades. There seemed to be some sort of missing evidence, but no one could seem to figure out what it was. In 1980, a miraculous find would finally lift the veil of mystery. What Dr. Luis Alvarez and his son, Dr. Walter Alvarez, uncovered would set off a firestorm.
in 1980, when Louis and Walter Alvarez were looking at the sedimentation rates. They weren't really interested so much in the extinction of dinosaurs. They were looking at measuring the rate of sedimentation of deep ocean sediments. One particular little layer, though, however, showed a whopping increase in the concentration of the metal iridium. I mean, they calculated if you were to spread the amount of iridium in this layer, that adds up to a total amount of material about equivalent to a 10-kilometer diameter asteroid.
A 10-kilometer asteroid. That's 6 miles wide, the size of Mount Everest.
The reason why an asteroid was looked at as the cause of the iridium spike at the KT boundary is because asteroids have an enormous amount of iridium in them. The Earth has iridium in it, but because it's a heavy metal, most of it settles towards the center of the planet. But this thick layer of iridium that separates the Cretaceous and Tertiary periods clearly was an anomaly, and it had been deposited over a very short time.
But there was something else that supported the asteroid theory.
Along with the high levels of iridium, they found something even more fascinating. Shocked quartz. Shocked quartz is a form of quartz that has a very different structure. Under incredible pressure, the crystals within the quartz are deformed and actually fractured. Well, under magnification, you can see these deformations.
There was only one other place on Earth where scientists had seen shocked quartz. It was at the site of a nuclear bomb test that was conducted at the Alamogordo Test Range in New Mexico in 1945.
Shocked quartz was first identified at the site of an underground nuclear bomb test. It's that kind of force that causes this particular quartz to form. So finding shocked quartz mixed within the high levels of iridium was pretty darn clear evidence that something massive had hit the Earth.
How big an asteroid would it take to distribute this much iridium around the entire planet? And they came up with a very rough number of something on the order of 10 kilometers across. That's, it's Mount Everest size sort of impactor, if you will.
But if an asteroid the size of Mount Everest killed the dinosaurs, where was the crater? For 10 years, the mystery remained. Then, in 1990, a new clue. Petroleum companies searching for oil in the Yucatan Peninsula came upon evidence of a massive underwater impact.
There was an oil company in Mexico searching for different places where there might be oil deposits, and in those areas they actually found a fairly circular feature. And in that, they deduced that that might be an impact crater.
The satellite images were mind-boggling.
And then they started to see the telltale signs that something very big and very large had hit. And now finally, what's happened just recent times is we have radar information from the space shuttle. And from that, you can actually see the outlines very faintly of this impact crater.
Today, this huge crater is named the Chicxulub crater. But was it the right size to be linked to the KT boundary evidence?
It wasn't until 1990, 1991 when the Chicxulub crater in northern Yucatan was identified. Most people felt pretty confident that that crater was 180 kilometers across based on the most prominent set of circular features there.
A 180-kilometer crater, that's 111 miles in size. But a question remained. How large would an asteroid have to be to create a crater of that magnitude?
So how big an impactor would it take to make a 180-kilometer diameter crater on the Earth? Well, at the typical speeds that asteroids will strike the Earth, of order 20 kilometers per second, the answer comes back an asteroid, about 10 kilometers across, and that's perfectly consistent with the original estimate from the concentration of iridium that the Alvarezes independently calculated a decade previously.
This evidence was overwhelming. An asteroid about the size of Mount Everest had struck the Earth in the Yucatan Peninsula at the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. Then, Dr. William Bottke Assistant Director of Space Studies at the Southwest Research Institute, went even further. His research pointed to the Baptistina asteroid fragments from the Deep Space Collision 250 million years earlier. And it showed that Earth wasn't Baptistina's only victim. An asteroid also struck the Moon, triggering a landslide.
The Apollo 17 spacecraft landed in a place where they actually detected evidence for a landslide that had happened about 110 million years ago. They believe this landslide was triggered by a cratering event on the other side of the Moon. Not only is it very large, it's well over 80 kilometers or so, but it's also surprisingly young. It would have this age of 110 million years. We find there's a very high probability, well over 70%, that this particular crater was produced by the Baptistina fragments.
An asteroid swarm blasted the solar system. One struck the Moon. Another was on a collision course with prehistoric Earth. The results were horrifying. Traveling at twice the speed of sound, an enormous asteroid made its way into our inner solar system on a collision course with the dinosaurs.
65 million years ago, the Earth suffered an enormous extinction event, one that would wipe out all the non-avian dinosaurs along with millions of other life forms. Imagine a rock the size of Manhattan Island slamming into the Earth at 43,000 miles per hour. You've heard of the phrase hell on Earth. This impact was so powerful, hell would have felt like a tanning booth in comparison.
In 2000, another link was found between the asteroid and prehistoric Earth.
Several years ago, there was surveys that went out, and they actually took cores from different places in the ocean, and they tried to probe to get these cores all the way back to 65 million years ago. And interestingly enough, in one of these core samples, they found a tiny piece of a meteorite, a fossil meteorite. And the composition of that meteorite is very consistent with the composition of Baptistina. So it's not just dynamics, but it's also this link with the chemistry.
The impact of the asteroid would kick off a series of cataclysmic events that would devastate life worldwide. So using science as a guide, is it possible to recreate the final moments of the dinosaurs? The first effect was the impact itself.
So when a 10-kilometer diameter asteroid enters through the atmosphere and impacts the surface of the Earth, you have to realize that 10-kilometer object is comparable to the size, the height scale of the atmosphere itself. And so the object almost effectively never even sees the atmosphere. At that time, a 10-kilometer impactor is going to vaporize, melt, and displace something like well over 10,000 cubic kilometers of the surface of the Earth. You've got 10,000 cubic kilometers of limestone and evaporate and granite being vaporized and excavated and thrown around the planet. It's a hideously violent event, the impact of an object of that size.
The initial impact would have instantaneously vaporized over 72.8 billion tons of solid rock.
You would be able to hear this blast around the world, probably multiple times going around it. We know from human history that when Krakatoa, the great eruption, occurred in Indonesia, that people heard it in the mainland and other parts of Eurasia. And it certainly was detected by barometers all the way around the world. This is something far larger. So you could probably hear this all the way around the world. There may have even been noticeable earthquakes spreading out from it around the world. And then things would begin to get really weird.
The impact of the asteroid striking the ocean would set off its next form of destruction: tidal waves. But these weren't just any tidal waves. These tsunamis were over 3 miles high.
At the time of the impact site itself was under a shallow sea, a couple hundred feet deep. And so very naturally, one of the immediate effects of the impact itself was to launch an enormous tsunami. This is unlike any tsunami any human has ever witnessed. We're talking kilometers height of water moving across what was then the early Gulf of Mexico.
After the initial impact flash, shock waves, and tsunamis, things began to really heat up.
The upper atmosphere would heat to maybe 1,200, 1,500 degrees, hotter than the elements in your oven on self-clean. Another way of looking at it is that 20% of 100 million megatons is 20 million megatons, which amounts to a 1 megaton hydrogen bomb at 6-kilometer intervals all around the planet. The heat from the upper atmosphere would have ignited fires everywhere that fuel was available, and the quantity of energy probably hit several thousand degrees on the surface for several hours, hot enough to melt steel.
The vaporized material blown out of the crater in this big expanding fireball, if you will, that was hundreds of kilometers across, glowing and as hot as the sun. So you've got these little millimeter and dust size little beads of glassy material recondensing from that vaporized rock, raining back through the atmosphere all across the entire planet. Tens and tens of billions of tons of this stuff. The combined effect of all these trillions upon trillions of re-entering meteorites shock heated the upper atmosphere to the point that for us standing on the surface of the Earth looking up, it for all the world would look like the whole atmosphere had been turned into a pizza oven.
For those plants and animals who survived the initial impact, fires, and darkness, the asteroid impact had one more deadly gift for Earth: a chemical assault.
If you had to choose the worst possible place on Earth for an asteroid to strike, it would have been the exact spot where the Baptistina asteroid struck in the Yucatan. Because lying beneath the seafloor, directly under the spot where the asteroid struck, were layers upon layers of anhydrite and limestone. Now, normally these minerals are perfectly harmless, but something very nasty happens when you add intense heat and pressure and mix that with water. And trust me, a 100 million megaton explosion caused a heck of a lot of heat and a huge amount of pressure.
The end result was a deadly acid that rained down on the Earth.
Those materials are very bad to impact into because when you vaporize and distribute the vapor from those particular rocks, you turn the carbonate-containing limestone into greenhouse warming CO2, carbon dioxide. You turn the sulfate-containing evaporite into sulfuric acid aerosols in the atmosphere. But then that sulfate acid aerosol tends to want to rain out of the atmosphere over time. And you've got this sulfuric acid rain dripping all over the landscape.
The impact that this asteroid had on the Earth was unparalleled. The power it released was greater than the combined force of man's entire nuclear arsenal.
Recreating the sequence of events that happened immediately following something as cataclysmic as this event can be difficult because so much of the evidence was obliterated at the moment of impact. But by relying on worldwide evidence, we can formulate a pretty accurate idea of what occurred.
Gathering information from scientists around the world and looking closely at the evidence, experts recreate the final moments of the dinosaurs. A countdown to Armageddon. After colliding with another asteroid millions of miles from Earth, fragments of the Baptistina asteroid are thrown into space. 110 million years ago, one of those pieces struck the moon. And now another even larger piece is speeding towards Earth. Planet Earth, 65 million years ago. 24 hours to impact. As dinosaurs on the dark side of the Earth sleep, Those on the other side go about their daily business of survival. Plant eaters continue to graze, while predators seek opportunities to make a kill. They are unaware that an asteroid streaks through space towards them. What appears as just another star among the millions of stars in space, the asteroid moves closer. 12 hours to impact. The island of Madagascar. A male Majungatholus is on the hunt for prey. His attention is focused on his next meal.
The male is tracking his prey. Using his senses, he moves closer to his quarry. As soon as he's close enough, he'll attack. But unknown to him, moments from now, food will be the last thing on his mind.
Halfway around the world, in what will become South Dakota, a family of Tyrannosaurus rex makes their way towards a river to drink.
Tyrannosaurs are family animals. They live in groups because it gives them a better chance at survival. Hunting together makes it easier to ambush and capture prey, and keeping their young nearby offers them protection from rivals. They're the biggest land predators on Earth, but even their might is no match for nature's fury.
3 hours to impact. Unknown to Earth's inhabitants, 129,000 miles away, the asteroid is moving at a speed of 43,000 miles per hour. Now, within 25,000 miles of Earth, the asteroid begins to glow as the light of the sun begins to illuminate it. The Earth's gravitational pull begins to draw it closer, causing it to speed up. Deep within a forest in prehistoric Texas, a group of raptors uses the trees to shade themselves from the intense sun. No amount of trees will be able to shade them from the heat that is about to set in on planet Earth. By midday, the temperatures now reach 90 degrees. Those in the northern hemisphere can now see a bright light in the sky.
The night before the impact, the asteroid appears in the sky as some new bright star. But by morning, this star remains in the sky and can be seen in total daylight. Nothing can stop it. No force can alter its course. Earth and her inhabitants are about to be introduced to a Baptistina asteroid.
30 minutes to impact. The asteroid now appears much larger. Silently, it closes the gap between it and the planet. Life below begins to stir. 10 minutes to impact. The asteroid continues its journey. It grows ever larger in the summer sky. As it draws closer, animals begin to panic.
Things are starting to heat up in the atmosphere. This triggers intense electrical storms throughout the planet. These storms won't be there for much longer.
5 minutes to impact. The sky is now illuminated by the glowing orb as it draws closer. The asteroid begins to heat up as it comes into contact with our atmosphere. The dinosaurs are starting to cook.
The temperatures begin to rise very quickly as this enormous rock begins to heat up. The plants and trees beneath it begin to smoke and then spontaneously combust under its intense heat. The world is about to catch fire.
1 minute to impact. Most of the Earth's forests are now engulfed in flames. The water in lakes and rivers begins to boil.
With the sound of 1,000 freight trains, the giant asteroid bears down on the planet. Its target, the Yucatan Peninsula. The asteroid is so big, as the first part hits the Earth, the rear of the asteroid is still 30,000 feet in the air. That's the height that most commercial airliners fly.
With the force of 1 million nuclear bombs, it explodes. The sound can be heard worldwide. The Earth shudders under the impact. Superheated air expands away from the impact site, faster than the speed of sound. Anything in its wake will vaporize.
In Texas, the Raptors turn to look towards the explosion. They're blinded by the light and within minutes are vaporized when a wall of wind, fire, and toxins rush past them. What was once a vibrant forest is now a total wasteland.
As the wall of wind continues moving away from the strike zone, an enormous plume of fire, smoke, and ash rockets skyward.
Within 5 minutes, the debris from the impact has been thrown over 30,000 feet into the air. Some of the smaller pieces are thrown above our atmosphere, but are pulled back down by the Earth's gravitational pull.
The plume of ash and dust begins to fan out across the horizon, carried by the jet streams. Halfway around the world, on the island of Madagascar, the dinosaurs go into panic mode. Their island has been spared by the fires, but the shockwave made by the sound passes directly overhead. Something more dangerous is coming towards them.
The impact of the asteroid in the ocean has now created a series of tsunamis that race across the oceans, destroying everything they come in contact with. The first wave to hit Madagascar is somewhat repelled by the dense forest. For the moment, the Majungatholus are safe, but the next wave to hit it is 3 miles high. It completely engulfs the entire island and kills everything in its wake. This island went from a dense jungle filled with life to a war-torn, lifeless pile of sand.
In the Yucatan Peninsula, where there was once solid ocean floor, a 180-mile-wide crater now exists. A plume of fire, smoke, and ash billow into the sky and begin to fan out across the horizon. For the plants and animal life farther from the impact, it's just a matter of time. Trillions of particles thrown into space begin to re-enter the atmosphere and rain down on Earth. As they re-enter, they burst into flames. The rain of fire begins to ignite the remainder of Earth's biomass.
The entire Earth is slowly being engulfed in darkness caused by the smoke and ash. What light remains is being generated by the worldwide forest fires. The Tyrannosaurus family has never faced anything like this before. A wall of superheated dirt and ash engulfs the family. The ash is so hot and caustic, it literally sears their lungs and flesh and cooks them from the inside out.
With the death and destruction brought on by the asteroid impact, it's easy to understand why dinosaurs and so many other creatures were wiped from the planet. But one question remained. How could anything survive this event?
Although you have death and destruction on a massive scale, millions of plants and animal species still survive. There were places on the Earth that were somewhat shielded from these series of events. Animals that could live underground or could retreat to caves or even to the deep ocean were able to make it through the initial blast. Some birds, reptiles, fish, insects, amphibians, and mammals were all able to find shelter or to be in the right location where they could survive. And it was they who went on to reclaim the planet and spread in numbers, ultimately reclaiming the Earth.
All modern life, including man, owes its existence to the Armageddon that unfolded 65 million years ago. Although millions of life forms died, those that survived would go on to inhabit every corner of the Earth and take their spots in evolutionary history, waiting for the next inevitable apocalypse.